There's a word I keep coming back to lately: synergy. It gets thrown around a lot in boardrooms and business decks, stripped of anything interesting. But I think the real meaning of it lives somewhere quieter, somewhere more personal. I found mine in a cafe. Not doing anything dramatic, just sitting with a latte on a chilly spring morning, laptop open, watching steam curl up from the cup. The kind of morning where the light comes in at a low angle and everything feels a little softer than usual. And there's something that happens in a place like that. Something I can't quite explain with logic, but I feel it every time. The people around me aren't doing anything for me, not directly. They're not helping me write, they're not offering advice, they're just there, chatting quietly, wrapping both hands around their cups, typing away on their own screens, lost in their own private worlds. But somehow their energy becomes mine. It moves through the room like something invisible. The soft clatter of cups, the low murmur of conversation, the sense that everyone around you has shown up to do something, even if none of you know what the others are working on. I open my laptop and something loosens in me. I start typing. Not because I forced myself to, not because I had a plan or a deadline, but because the room gave me permission in its quiet way. Because being surrounded by people in motion made me want to be in motion too. That's synergy to me. Not a strategy, not a framework, just the strange, beautiful fact that human energy is contagious, and that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is simply place yourself near other people who are alive and engaged and present. I think about this more than I probably should. Why a cafe works when a home office sometimes doesn't. Why the hum of strangers can feel more comforting than silence. Why a warm drink in a cold season feels like it does something deeper than just warming your hands. Maybe it's because we're not built for pure isolation. Maybe the myth of the lone genius, head down, door locked, grinding in solitude, maybe that only works for some people some of the time. And for the rest of us, we need a little ambient proof that life is happening, that other people are out there figuring things out, creating things, moving forward. The latte helps, I won't pretend it doesn't, but it's really the room. It's the invisible agreement everyone in that space is made to show up, to be somewhere, to do something. And I just quietly borrow that energy. I sit down, I open the screen, and somehow, without anyone knowing they did it, the strangers around me helped me begin. I've been thinking about why certain environments make me feel more alive than others. Not more comfortable, more alive. There's a difference. Comfort is the couch, the familiar blanket, the path of least resistance. Alive is something else. It's that subtle electricity you feel when you're somewhere that has a pulse, when the space itself seems to be doing something. I've worked alone. I know what that feels like. The quiet that starts out feeling productive and slowly, almost without you noticing, turns into something heavier. A stillness that isn't peaceful, it's just empty. You start checking your phone not because you're curious about anything, but because you need proof that the world is still out there. And then you walk into a room where people are working, really working, not performing productivity, actually absorbed in something. Heads down, fingers moving, the occasional murmur of collaboration, and something in you just shifts. It isn't magic, but it isn't nothing either. There's actual science underneath this feeling. Researchers have found that working in proximity to focused, engaged people raises your own performance, even when you're doing completely unrelated work, even when nobody speaks, even when you don't know a single person in the room. The mere presence of others in a state of effort seems to pull something out of us that we couldn't access alone. They call it co-regulation, the idea that human nervous systems are not fully self-contained, that we attune to each other unconsciously, the way instruments in an orchestra tune to a shared note before the music begins. I think about this every time I sit down in a shared space and feel that quiet calibration happen inside me. It's not distraction, it's the opposite. It's like the room hands you a frequency and your mind locks onto it without being asked. I've noticed it in cafes, in libraries, in co-working spaces where nobody talks to you, but everyone around you is building something. There's a kind of generosity in that, strangers lending you their momentum without knowing they're doing it. And here's what I find most interesting about it. The quality of your own output changes, not just the quantity, not just the fact that you showed up and typed more words, but the actual texture of the thinking. It goes deeper. It stays focused longer. The internal critic that usually interrupts every third sentence seems to quiet down when other people are present and working. Maybe it's accountability without pressure. Nobody is watching you specifically. Nobody is grading your output. But the collective act of showing up, of everyone in that room having decided that today they will make something, solve something, move something forward, that decision becomes ambient. You absorb it. You match it. The room does something for you that willpower alone often can't. It holds you, not tightly, not with any expectation, just enough to keep you from drifting back into the comfortable nowhere that's always waiting just one tab away. I used to think discipline was something you generated entirely from within, a private reservoir you either had or didn't, but I'm less sure of that now. Sometimes discipline is just knowing which room to walk into, and then having the presence of mind to sit down, open the screen, and let the quiet hum of other people do the rest. It can't help but make me look forward to the next time I get to work around people, feel that energy, that flow just from the presence of others around me, absorbing the vibe, the determination, the willingness to accomplish a goal of some sort, and the lovely feeling of achievement afterwards. Is there a synergy that you feel working around a certain person, place, or even a favorite pet? I'd love to know. Please leave a comment below and keep the synergy right here flowing. I want to tell you about something I started doing recently that has genuinely changed the texture of my days. It's called a dopamine detox. And before you roll your eyes, I know, it sounds like another wellness trend with a fancy name. Just hear me out. Because what I've been experiencing over the last 5 days has been quietly remarkable. The idea behind a dopamine detox is simple. We live in a world that is constantly flooding our brains with stimulation. Music in our ears before we're even fully awake, endless scrolling before we've had a single original thought, shows and videos playing in the background like wallpaper we stopped actually seeing. All of it triggering little hits of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, over and over again all day long. And the problem isn't that any one of those things is terrible. It's that taken together, they never stop. The dial never turns down. Your brain never gets a chance to just settle. So, I decided to give mine a window. Just 6 hours a day where I pull back from all of it. No music, no scrolling, no binge watching. 6 hours where the noise goes quiet and what's left is just me and whatever I choose to actually do with my attention. Now, here's what I want to be clear about, because I think this is the part people get wrong about dopamine detoxes. It's not a punishment. It's not some extreme deprivation experiment where you sit in an empty room staring at the wall questioning your life choices. I still eat. I still rest if I need to. I still take care of myself. I just remove the constant stream of external stimulation for that window of time. And what I do instead is actually kind of beautiful in its simplicity. I journal. I work on creative projects. I clean, which sounds mundane, but there's something meditative about it. I take care of things I've been putting off. I think. I actually just think, without a podcast running over the top of my thoughts. 5 days in, and something has already shifted. I am more productive than I've been in months. Not in a frantic, anxious way, but in a quiet, sustained way, like a current that's just steadily flowing rather than surging and crashing. And the creativity, that's the part that genuinely surprised me. When you take away all the incoming stimulation, your mind doesn't go blank. It goes searching. It starts filling that space with its own material, images, ideas, connections between things, thoughts that feel like they actually belong to you rather than being assembled from everything you consumed that morning. I think that's what creativity actually is a lot of the time. Not some magical gift that visits certain people, just the natural output of a mind that's been given enough quiet to hear itself. 6 hours. That's all I'm asking of myself. And so far, it's giving back far more than it costs. I'm not a scientist. I want to be upfront about that. But I've spent enough time reading about how the brain works to understand the basic shape of what's happening when we talk about dopamine. And once I understood it, the whole detox thing stopped feeling like a wellness gimmick and started feeling like something that actually made sense. Here's the simple version. Dopamine isn't really a pleasure chemical. I know that's how it gets described, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is more accurately a wanting chemical. It's the thing that drives you toward a reward, the anticipation of something good, the reach for the phone before you've even consciously decided to reach for it, the next episode starting automatically before you've chosen to keep watching, the scroll continuing even when nothing on the screen is actually interesting anymore. Your brain releases dopamine in anticipation of the reward, not always because of it. And here's where it gets interesting. When you flood that system constantly, when every spare second of your day contains some form of stimulation, some micro reward, the brain adapts. It recalibrates. It raises the baseline. Suddenly, the ordinary things, a quiet morning, a blank page, your own thoughts, register as almost unbearably understimulating, not because they're actually boring, but because your brain has been trained to expect something louder. That's the trap most of us are living inside without realizing it. The detox works because it gives the system a chance to recalibrate in the other direction. When you remove the constant incoming stimulation, even just for a defined window of time, the brain doesn't go silent. It gets restless first. That's the part nobody warns you about. And I felt that. I want to be honest about that part. The first hour of my detox window is uncomfortable. There's this low-level agitation that moves through me, a reaching for something that isn't there. My hand moves toward my phone out of pure reflex before I even know I'm doing it. I catch myself wanting to put music on just to fill the air. The silence feels almost itchy. That discomfort is real, and I've come to understand it as a good sign, evidence that the recalibration is actually happening. Because here's what comes after it. Somewhere around the second hour, something settles. The agitation quiets, and in that quietest space, something else starts to emerge. Thoughts that feel more like mine, observations about small things, a memory that surfaces unexpectedly, the beginning of an idea. The creativity doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It seeps in slowly, the way light comes through a window when clouds shift. I think that's because creativity was always there. It wasn't blocked by some lack of talent or inspiration. It was just drowned out, buried under the noise of everything I was consuming. The detox doesn't create anything. It just gets quiet enough that you can finally hear what was already there. And once you hear it, really hear it, you realize how long it's been since you actually listened to yourself. That alone might be worth the 6 hours. That being said, I'm so thrilled to say I'd like to continue this routine for another 25 days, so a 30-day total journey, and revisit if I'd like to continue doing it then. I'll be posting updates. In the meantime, I'd like to ask you, is there anything you could hold back on and possibly experiment with dopamine detox on your own terms, your own rules? You may just see the benefit. There's this moment I've started living for. It doesn't happen on schedule. You can't force it. But when it comes, and it's been coming more often lately, it feels like something quietly clicks into place somewhere behind your eyes. A mental connection, a realization, the sudden, satisfying sense that two things you already knew have just introduced themselves to each other for the first time. I had one this morning, actually. I was sitting with my matcha, which has become this small ritual I take pretty seriously now, and I was just thinking, not about anything in particular, just letting the mind move at its own pace, the way it does when the caffeine is gentle and the morning is still quiet and nobody needs anything from you yet. And something surfaced, a connection between something I'd been struggling with and something I'd read about weeks ago that I'd almost forgotten. And for a moment, I just sat there with it, turning it over, feeling the shape of it. That's the thing about matcha that I keep noticing. It doesn't hit you like coffee does, that sudden brightness, that slight edge of urgency. Matcha is slower, warmer. It opens the mind rather than jolting it. And in that softer state, the thoughts seem to find each other more easily. The logic flows in a different way, more associative, more willing to wander into the periphery where the interesting stuff tends to live. I don't know if that's the L-theanine or the ritual of it, or just the fact that I've trained myself to associate that cup with a certain quality of attention. Maybe it's all three, but I've stopped questioning it and started protecting it. Because here's what I've learned about mental connections. They're not random. They happen more often when you create the conditions for them, when you slow down enough, when you're not filling every available second with input, when there's actually room in the mind for something new to form. And when one does form, I write it down immediately, not later, right then. Because they evaporate. You think you'll remember it, and you won't. That specific quality of insight, the angle it came from, the precise way it connected, fades faster than a dream. So the journal comes out, the thought gets captured. And then I sit with the question that I've started asking myself every single time. How do I use this? Not in a purely transactional way. Not every realization needs to become a productivity hack. But genuinely, is there something here I can apply? Some small change in how I approach my morning, my work, my thinking. Some micro decision I can make that shifts the trajectory by even 1 degree. 1 degree doesn't sound like much. But 1 degree sustained over months, over years, that's an entirely different destination. I've become quietly obsessed with this idea that the big transformations in a life aren't usually made of big, dramatic moments. They're made of these small, accumulated shifts, tiny recalibrations that compound over time, the way interest compounds in an account you keep adding to. You change one small thing, then another, then another. And one day you look back and the distance between where you started and where you are is enormous. But you can't point to the single moment it happened, because it didn't. It happened in 1,000 small moments, most of them over a quiet cup of something warm before the day began. So here's what I want to ask you. Think about the last time you had one of those moments, a realization, a mental connection, something that felt genuinely true and useful. Did you write it down? Did you do anything with it? Or did it dissolve back into the noise of the day before you had the chance? I want to talk about what actually happens after the realization hits, because that's the part most people skip. The realization comes, that little flash of clarity, that satisfying click, and then life continues. The phone buzzes, something needs attention, and by the time you circle back, it's gone. Not gone like you forgot it entirely, gone in a more frustrating way. You remember that you had a good thought, but the specific texture of it, the exact angle it came from, the precise reason it felt important, that's the part that evaporates. I've lost so many thoughts that way, years of them probably. So I changed something small. And that small change has compounded into something I now consider genuinely essential. I write it down immediately. Not in 5 minutes, not after I finish the matcha, right then, in whatever form it comes, messy, incomplete, half-formed. I don't wait until I can articulate it perfectly because perfect articulation is the enemy of capture. The thought doesn't need to be fully dressed before it goes in the journal. It just needs to get there. I keep the journal close for exactly this reason. Not in another room, not in a bag. Close, because the window between having the thought and losing it is shorter than most people realize. Your brain is not a storage device. It's more like a surface. Things land on it, and if you don't pick them up quickly, the next thing lands on top and the first one is buried. So the journal gets the raw version, the incomplete sentence, the half-articulated thing, and that's fine. That's actually the point. But here's the part I've had to develop more intentionally. What happens next? Because capturing the thought is only the first move. The second move is the one that actually changes anything. I call it the application question, and I ask it every single time without exception. It's simple, almost embarrassingly simple. What do I do with this? I sit with that question and let it breathe. Sometimes the answer is nothing. The realization is interesting, but not actionable right now, and I note that and move on. Sometimes the answer is immediate and obvious. There's something I can change today, some small adjustment to how I approach a task or a habit or a relationship with my own time. And sometimes, this is the one I've learned to pay the most attention to, the answer is a question back. The realization opens a door rather than closes one. It points towards something I need to think about more, explore more, understand better before I can use it. Those are the ones I mark. I put a small symbol next to them in the margin, a prompt to return. Because not everything useful is immediately useful. Some thoughts are seeds that need more time before they become anything. The practice isn't just about acting on what you capture, it's about tending to it, revisiting, letting the connections deepen over days and weeks until the thing that started as a vague intuition becomes something you can actually hold and use. I've been surprised by how often I go back through old journal entries and find something I wrote weeks ago that means something completely different now, that I understand better now, that connects to something I've since learned or experienced in a way I couldn't have seen at the time. The journal becomes less of a record and more of a conversation, a long, slow dialogue with yourself across time. And that's something I didn't expect when I started this practice. I thought I was just building a system for capturing ideas. What I was actually building was a relationship with my own thinking, a way of taking my own mind seriously, of saying what happens in here matters, and it's worth paying attention to. That shift alone has been worth more than any specific insight I've ever written down. So I want to ask you, when was the last time you actually went back and read something you wrote to yourself? Not to edit it, not to judge it, just to see what was there, what you were thinking, what you noticed that you might have otherwise let go. Because it's probably more interesting than you remember. Sometimes, when the motivation runs dry and the day feels heavier than it should, I close my eyes. Not to escape, not to sleep, just to look forward. It's something I've been doing more lately, this quiet practice of projecting myself into the future. Not in the anxious way, where you're cataloging everything that could go wrong or measuring how far you still have to go, but in a different way entirely, a hopeful way, almost like daydreaming, but with intention behind it. I pick a specific moment in time, maybe 2 years from now, maybe 5, and I just inhabit it for a while. I imagine what the room looks like, what I'm working on, what my mornings feel like. I imagine the version of me that kept showing up, kept building, kept choosing the harder and more interesting path on the days when the easier one was right there. And something happens when I do that. Something real. The future stops being abstract and starts feeling like a place I'm actually traveling toward, like it already exists somewhere ahead of me, patient and waiting, taking shape based on the small decisions I make today. That thought, that my present actions are literally constructing that future in real time, does something to me that no amount of motivational content ever has. It makes today feel like it matters. Not in a pressure-filled way, not with the weight of you must do everything right or you'll ruin it. More like a quiet understanding that the gap between where I am and where I want to be is made up entirely of days, ordinary days, days exactly like this one. And I have a lot of them still ahead of me. That's the part people don't talk about enough, the sheer amount of time most of us still have. We talk about time like it's running out, like every moment not spent optimizing is a moment wasted. But when I close my eyes and look forward honestly, what I see isn't a deadline. I see a long, open road with a lot of room to gather speed. There are things I want to build, things I want to create, a version of my life that looks and feels like something I actually chose, not something that just accumulated around me while I was busy consuming other people's stories. And here's what I keep coming back to. The visions are strong. They don't feel like fantasies. They feel like previews. Like my imagination is showing me something real that I haven't reached yet, but absolutely could. When I open my eyes after those moments, something has shifted. The inertia loosens. The blank page doesn't seem quite as intimidating. The first step, whatever it is, feels smaller and more manageable because I can see what it's connected to now. I can see the thread that runs from this moment all the way forward into that imagined future. It doesn't take long, sometimes just a few minutes with my eyes closed, breathing, letting the vision clarify. And then I open my eyes and I begin. Not because I have to, not because of discipline or obligation or some productivity framework I read about, but because the future I just imagined is genuinely worth walking toward. And the only way to get there is to start moving today. So I want to ask you something, and take a moment with it, because I think it matters. When you close your eyes and look forward honestly, what do you actually see? And more importantly, what would it feel like to start believing that version of your life is genuinely possible? Let me tell you about a vision I keep coming back to. Not because I've planned it out on a spreadsheet somewhere, not because I have a 5-step roadmap pinned to my wall, but because it keeps showing up on its own. The same basic shape of it, returning whenever I get quiet enough to let it. I'm somewhere I've never been, a city I don't fully know yet. Maybe somewhere in Europe, Lisbon, maybe, or Budapest, or some small coastal town in southern Italy where the light hits the buildings at an angle that makes everything look like a painting. Or maybe it's Southeast Asia, Chiang Mai, Bali, some place where the cost of living is low enough that the financial pressure loosens its grip just slightly, and that loosening changes everything about how a day feels. I'm sitting somewhere with my laptop open, a cafe, maybe, or a rented apartment with a balcony and a view I haven't gotten used to yet. There's a time difference between me and everyone back home, which means the morning belongs completely to me before the rest of the world wakes up and starts needing things. And I'm working, really working. Not the distracted, half-present version of working that I know too well, but the kind where time disappears, and you look up and 2 hours have passed, and you feel more energized than when you started. The work is something I built. Content, writing, creative projects that started as experiments and slowly over time became something people actually sought out. A YouTube channel, a body of work, a voice that found its audience not by chasing trends, but by being consistent and honest and genuinely itself. The income isn't extravagant in this vision. That's not really the point. The point is that it's mine, generated by something I made, flowing in while I sleep, while I eat, while I sit on that balcony watching the light change over a skyline I couldn't have imagined 5 years earlier. That's the vision. And what I notice every time it comes back is the feeling underneath it more than the specific details. Because the details might change, the city, the cafe, the exact nature of the work, but the feeling stays consistent. It's the feeling of having enough time, enough freedom, enough creative output to feel like your days are actually expressing something true about who you are. It's the feeling of having bet on yourself and not lost. And here's the thing about that vision that I've had to learn to sit with. It's not a fantasy. It's not naive or delusional or out of reach. People are living that life right now. Not special people, not people with resources or connections or advantages I don't have. Just people who decided early enough, or late enough, it doesn't matter, that they were going to try. That they were going to build something day by day in whatever hours they could carve out, until the something became real enough to stand on. I have the hours. I have more hours than most people who are building toward this. And I have something else too, a perspective shaped by solitude and introspection and a genuine need to make sense of things. That's not nothing. That's actually the raw material most creative work is made from. So the vision keeps coming back, and I keep letting it. Not as an escape from the present, but as a compass for it. Because every day I sit down and work on something real, I am, in the most literal sense, walking toward that balcony, that city, that version of mornings that belongs entirely to me. And I want to ask you, what does yours look like? Not the responsible answer, not the realistic answer, the true one. The version of your life that keeps showing up uninvited in the quiet moments. What is it actually showing you?